In Oregon, there is a town, one that its own residents once tried to erase through a vote. But what disappeared wasn't just a name on a map. What vanished were the people tied to that decision, somewhere else in the daylight. Those same people pour wine for passing travelers, laughing, chatting, as if everything is completely normal. But if someone even casually mentions a certain extraterrestrial case file number, the entire neighborhood suddenly lowers its voice. And the creepiest part? All of this still isn't Oregon's strangest story. Today we're exploring the top 10 creepiest small towns in Oregon. The places are still beautiful. The shops are still open. But on every street it feels like a truth was never fully told. It didn't disappear. It just went quiet. And sometimes all it takes is a single moment of real silence for an entire town to remind you that something really did happen here. Number 10, Shenandoah. The western set that never got the memo the show ended. The moment you enter Shenandoah, you don't notice the buildings first. You notice the space. Not the cozy, artsy kind of space. The kind that stretches out too far. Sagebrush instead of sidewalks. Thin, stubborn trees. Wind that never asks permission. A high desert horizon that feels like it got bored and walked away. This is Wasco County along U.S. Route 97, deep in Oregon's Pacific Northwest high desert, where silence doesn't just exist, it stands upright. But here's the twist. Shenandoah was never meant to be forgotten. In the early 1900s, this place exploded into importance. It became known as the wool capital of the world, a title it wore like a crown. Around 1904, the wool business here was worth nearly $5 million a year, an almost unbelievable amount for the time. Picture the scene. Dust in the air, bales of wool stacked high, buyers shaking hands that smelled of lanolin and ambition. By 1910, about 600 people lived here. Not a metropolis, but a real town with a heartbeat, a main street, a rhythm, a future. And then the map changed. The railroad shifted its route. Trade followed the steel tracks somewhere else. And Shenandoah felt the cold shoulder. That's how some American towns die. Not with explosions, not with headlines, but by being skipped, like a song no one taps twice. Then came the fires. Not one clean tragedy you can neatly explain, but two. In 1910 and 1911, that tore through much of the business district, accelerating the town's slow collapse. Shenandoah didn't die in a single moment. It burned and faded at the same time. That's why today it feels less like ruins and more like a movie set after closing night. Doors shut, windows boarded, buildings standing perfectly still, like actors frozen in costume, because no one ever told them the show was over. And right at the center of it all stands one structure that refused to go dark, the Shenandoah Hotel. Built in the early 1900s, it still dominates the town like a brick exclamation point. After sitting closed for 16 years, the hotel reopened in August 2023, and here's the detail that makes it feel unreal. It's managed by South Wasco Fire and Rescue, a ghost town, with its lights back on, run by the people who arrive when everything else is falling apart. So here's the question that sticks with you, long after you leave. If the town is empty, who is the hotel waiting for? And why does the late afternoon light on that silent street feel like someone stepped out just 5 minutes ago and might walk back in at any second? Number 9, Golden. The ghost town with a fake cemetery that feels too real. Golden sits quietly in Josephine County, preserved as a state heritage site and officially listed on the National Register of Historic Places. On paper, it sounds wholesome, like a neat historical stop, a place to stretch your legs, read a sign, and move on. And at first glance, everything looks almost too tidy. Restored buildings, clean paths, a peaceful stillness that feels intentional. Then you notice the cemetery. It looks real enough to change your behavior. Your voice drops without you realizing it. Your steps slow down. You instinctively show respect, the way people do when they believe they're standing among the dead. But if you step closer, if you actually read what's there, the truth quietly reveals itself. No one is buried here. The headstones aren't markers of loss. They're props. In the 1950s, they were built for a scene in the Western TV show, Gunsmoke, designed to look convincing on camera, and forgotten when the crew packed up and left. A fake cemetery, left behind to age into something more unsettling. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Visitors still leave coins, flowers, and small trinkets. On top of those fictional graves, gestures of respect for people who never existed. So ask yourself this: what's more disturbing? A real cemetery filled with real history, or a fake one that people treat as if it's real? Because once enough people do that, year after year, something strange begins to happen. The fiction starts to settle in. Golden becomes a place where history and performance overlap, where a movie set slowly absorbs human belief until it feels legitimate. You're no longer sure whether the silence is honoring the past or maintaining an illusion. That's what makes Golden different from a normal ghost town. It isn't empty, it's curated. And when you stand there, between real buildings and fake graves, lowering your voice for reasons you can't fully explain, you realize something unsettling. You're whispering. You just don't know who you're whispering for. Number 8, Valsets. The town that was removed, not abandoned. Valsets didn't sink. It didn't burn. It didn't die from poverty. It was erased. Founded in 1919 as a timber company town, Valsets was a real community. By the early 1980s, about 300 people still called it home. Children went to school, mail was delivered, routines hummed. A normal small-town life in every sense. Then in 1983, everything changed. Boise Cascade, the company that owned the town, announced a shutdown. And what followed wasn't decline. It was a meticulous disappearance. By 1984, every building was gone. The streets, the homes, the memories, all wiped clean. And it didn't stop there. The nearby artificial lake, Valsets Lake, was drained entirely. Shoreline erased. Water gone, like it never existed. A town deleted. Its footprint removed. Its very existence scrubbed from the land. Now pause and think. If a place can vanish so completely, with nothing left but the faintest traces of memory, what else could disappear? What other stories could be wiped clean? Without a trace? Valsets isn't just a ghost town. It's a ghost in the legal and physical sense. A reminder that sometimes a town doesn't die. It is carefully unmade. And standing on that land today, with forest reclaiming every trace, you feel it, the eerie perfection of erasure, and the question that never leaves your mind. If an entire town can vanish, what else can simply be removed from the world? Number 7, Sumter. The sleeping machine that ate a valley. In Sumter, you don't need ghosts, because the town already has a monster, the Sumter Valley Dredge. From 1935 to 1954, this enormous machine chewed through the valley floor, extracting over $4 million worth of gold, and leaving behind tailings, long, jagged piles of waste rock that rise like the exposed ribs of the land itself. It didn't just work quietly. It reshaped the valley. Every scoop, every grind, pulled the earth apart and left a scar that time never fully healed. And now, it sits there, silent on the water, like a sleeping leviathan. But the silence is deceptive. It's not peace. It's a pause. A warning. Ask yourself this. If the dredge woke up tomorrow, would you hear it coming? Or would the valley only realize it had started moving when it was already too late? Sumter isn't just a town with history. It's a valley that remembers every bite, every machine stroke, every pulse of industry that reshaped it forever. And when you walk along the river today, you can feel the weight of that machine, even though it's still, even though the town is quiet. It waits, and the question lingers. If a machine could devour a valley once, could it do it again? Number 6, Granite. A city that exists on paper, and almost nowhere else. Granite is a legally recognized city, and that in itself is unsettling. Number 6, Granite. A city that exists on paper, and almost nowhere else. Granite is a legally recognized city, and that in itself is unsettling. Perched high in the Blue Mountains of Grant County, around 4,700 feet above sea level, the 2020 census counted 32 people. 32, not a population. A group chat. The town's origin is just as strange. Gold was discovered along Granite Creek on July 4, 1862, and the settlement was proudly named Independence. But in 1878, when the residents tried to open a post office, they discovered the name was already taken, so the town that came searching for freedom lost its first identity, before it even fully existed. But the true unease isn't inside the town. It's outside it. Along Granite Creek, decades of toil, by Chinese miners left behind a stone labyrinth, sprawling across nearly 60 acres. It's not a cemetery. It's not a fort. It's a monument to labor, to people whose lives were real, whose names are barely remembered by history. Walking through those winding stone lines, your mind searches for purpose. A boundary? A message? A warning? But the answer is simple. Someone was here, and the road leading in and out, often snow-covered for much of the year, feels less like a path and more like the land itself deciding who is allowed to enter. So here's the question that lingers. If a city is alive on paper, but hidden by nature, isolation, and time, where does it truly exist? On the map? In memory? Or only in the echoes of those who once walked its streets? Number 5, Antelope, the town that lost itself in a vote. Today, Antelope is so small that its population number barely seems real, a rounding error on a census sheet. But in the 1980s, this tiny town made national headlines. In 1981, a nearby property, Muddy Ranch, covering about 70,000 acres, was purchased by representatives of the Rajneesh movement. New residents moved in, and in a town as small as Antelope, numbers are power. When the newcomers outnumber the old residents, the town doesn't erupt in a fight. It doesn't scream. It simply changes its voice. The real horror wasn't in a riot, or in fire or famine. It was quiet, procedural, bureaucratic, because at the same time, the original residents had attempted something extraordinary: to dissolve the city government, to legally remove Antelope from the map. But in a vote, their effort failed. No monsters, no ghosts, just ballots and silent, decisive change. Antelope became part of a larger tension in Oregon's history, a backdrop for what would become the infamous 1984 Salmonella attack. During a local election, an event that left 751 people sick and 45 hospitalized. So the question lingers, long after the headlines fade. If a town can lose its identity, through votes and demographics, who truly owns it? Is it the land, the name, or the people who simply outnumber you? Number 3, Astoria. Built beside a graveyard of ships, Astoria is alive, colorful, charming. A coastal town that seems to sell postcards in every view. But the truth hides beneath its picturesque surface. Astoria sits at the edge of the Columbia River Bar, infamously nicknamed the Graveyard of the Pacific by sailors. Over 2,000 shipwrecks litter these waters. Deceptive waves, sudden storms, currents that do not forgive mistakes. But the danger isn't just in the water. Beneath the streets you walk every day, there lies another Astoria, an older town buried beneath the current one. Old maps and flood records reveal spots where buildings were abandoned and the new city simply built over them. So when you stand at the waterfront today, you're not just looking at the ocean. You're looking through layers. Layers of the city. Layers of mistakes. Layers of lives lost. The eerie question remains, if the ground beneath you still breathes with the past, how safe is the city above? And how long before the layers below decide to remind us that nothing truly disappears? Number 2, Port Orford. Where the ocean doesn't let go. Port Orford is one of the few ports in the United States where boats aren't simply launched by hand. They are lowered into the water by crane. Why? Because here the ocean refuses to be controlled. The waves don't keep schedules. Currents don't respect human plans. Storms don't negotiate. In 1971, a Coast Guard helicopter crashed here. Crew members were lost, swallowed by the unpredictable sea. Fishing accidents, capsized boats. Tragedy seems to follow the coastline, and the stories never really end. Locals know the truth. The ocean here is beautiful, but it is not friendly. This is a place where the horizon is more than a view. It is a boundary, and some things that cross that boundary never return. Standing at Port Orford today, you can feel it. The pull of the Pacific, the memory of every storm, every shipwreck, every life taken quietly by the water. It is breathtaking. It is mesmerizing. It is dangerous. Here the sea doesn't ask for permission, and it doesn't forgive. Number 1, La Pine. The town that chose to forget. La Pine looks ordinary, unremarkable, safe, and that is exactly what makes it dangerous. For years, whispers have traveled through this town. Cult rumors, UFO sightings, unexplained disappearances. But the real fear isn't about what happened. It's about what doesn't get spoken of. Questions are met with averted eyes. Stories are carefully muted. Conversations drop to a whisper the moment something unusual is mentioned. Lapine teaches a lesson in silence, a lesson in forgetting. And perhaps that is why some stories never leave the town, because towns don't hide secrets from ghosts. They hide them from people. Here, the quiet isn't peaceful. It is intentional. It is protective. It is a boundary. And standing there, you feel it. A community that remembers just enough to survive, but forgets enough to remain alive. Some places leave marks on the land. Lapine leaves them in the mind.